And actually, some of these questions are going to be answered when you watch the age-based parameters lecture that is recorded. So hopefully you'll be able to watch that tonight at some point, tomorrow morning at some point, and see if it doesn't answer some of your questions. We break it down into various age groups, how we use somatic voice work with these different age groups, and what are some of the pitfalls or some of the pluses and minuses. So you can find that in the Google Classroom under the same place where you would find the textbook. So it's in that same topic. So just click on that and watch it tonight.
Good. Now, we have also noticed that there is a slight discrepancy between the PDF and the printed book. And some of the time I am using the printed book, and some of the time I'm on the PDF. So it's just one page either way. And so please be tolerant of that. We'll try to agree on what we've got. But for today, we'll just know that it's a page one way or the other. Now I'm going to pick up on page 48/49, which is the section called vocal exercises, which is section 7. Now, when I first started doing this, people would come and they would get very annoyed in level 1 because, you know, I came here for some exercises, LoVetri. Where are my exercises? You didn't give me my exercises. I'm like, come on, you didn't give me the exercises. And I'm standing up there going, no, sorry, nope, no exercises. You already have a dozen million exercises that you've already learned. And what good are they doing you, or you wouldn't be here? In my very subtle, gentle manner. I had a nightclub partner who used to tell me on a regular basis that I was a truck driver. My mother called me a bulldozer. I have 5 planets in Aries, so, you know, you have to cut me a little slack. Anyway, as I said earlier today, you could do you can have a minimum of like 5 exercises or 6 exercises, and depending upon where you put them and what you do with them, you could get almost any kind of a function out of very simple things. So when you're looking for, you go online and you go shopping for, oh, I took this exercise from Sam, and I took that exercise from Mary, and I took another exercise from Joe, and now I have all these cool exercises. And my reaction to that is, so what? Good is that? The point of somatic voice work is to learn to figure out what is the exercise likely to cause, and how do you get that response, stimulus response. The exercise is the stimulus, the student's sound is the response. Now, theoretically, this response that the student makes should be spontaneous, immediate, and not particularly calculated. What? What do you mean, not calculated? Isn't that why they're taking lessons? They're calculated. And then you get this comment, well, you're thinking too much, to the student. Oh, don't think too much, you're listening to yourself. Well, if you don't listen to yourself, you can't sing, because deaf people don't sing. You have to hear yourself. So you need to learn to listen for a function. And it's crazy making to tell somebody not to listen to themselves, because it's like if I said to you, look in the mirror, but don't see yourself. Huh? Now, it's true that vocology and audiology are separate. They shouldn't be, but that happens to be the way the sciences developed. And when I spoke to the one person I know who is both a speech pathologist and an audiologist, and I asked him, Dr. Shrivastava, why is that? He said he didn't know, and no one seems to know. I asked Dr. Sundberg also. And it was like, well, yeah, that's just what happened. So it's not really possible to separate what we hear from what we sound like. If that were the case, anybody who was born deaf would speak and sound normally the way we all do without any issue. So clearly how we hear is a very important component. And we don't know, we are probably not going to know for a long time, whether some of us have better hearing than others, even in the normal range. Okay, not counting people who have a hearing deficiency, which as you get older, you have anyway. And also, if commercial music, the whole realm of CCM styles is 99% of the time amplified, and you're getting the sound through an in-ear monitor or through a floor monitor, and you have a really good mic, you have a Shure mic, or you have some other kind of mic, the mic itself can have an effect on how your voice goes through it, and the speaker system has an effect on how your voice sounds as an end product. So your ears actually become your speakers, and that's incredible. We have no data. Zip. Young people, if you're looking for research, this is where you got to go. There's none. What is the interface between this mic and that mic on the same sounds in the same singer? How does it change the feedback loop, the proprioceptive feedback loop? We don't know. It's 2020. Nobody's looked at this. And I've been asking this question since 1978. Excuse me, what happens when you deal with the amplification? Oh, we don't deal with that. Oh. So you can get books of exercises. There's a couple of new ones. And that's what happened. The authors went to, Mary and Sally and Joe and Pete and Fred, and they got an exercise from each person. From my standpoint, not particularly because these were nationally or internationally recognized experts. It was mostly because these are people who they knew. Okay? So you got the people who had just graduated with a degree who gave an exercise, and you had people who've been teaching for 45 years with an exercise. And the exercises are all the same. Well, okay, yeah, on a piece of paper, notes and syllables, they're all the same for everybody. It's what you do with them, how you work with them, what your intention is, and what you expect to get. So part of the breakouts, when you do them, is we're going to teach you, like, okay, so a person comes in and they say, I really would like to sing louder, but when I get louder, I just get, ah, and I can't get louder. I don't know what to do. And so you, as teacher, should go, I wonder if there's some chest register here. So you go down low, and the low is, no chest register. So you have to then functionally configure an exercise and find whatever you can find that sounds more like, and live there. Wait for the buzz. That's what we call that. Until the person can do, without struggling. And in that, you have to think about physical anything, kinesthetic changes. Think sports, think dance. Some of the questions have been, well, how can I get the student to do blah, blah, blah? So whatever it is that you want to get them to do, no. You want to pick the exercise that does that. You don't want to pick say, oh, my student won't do blah, blah, blah. It's because you have not elicited that response yet in an exercise. Okay? Now, my first training was dance. My first dance class, I was 3, and my mother was a professional dancer. So I know that you go to dance class, you do the floor work and the bar work first. You stretch your body first. Then you learn a combination and you go across the floor. So if this is also true in exercises where you say to the student, okay, remember how that feels. Why? I remember from when I used to be able to dance, not that long ago. I can't now because I have a bad hip. I didn't forget how to dance, but my body doesn't do that now. So if you say to me, remember how it felt to do, a mambo, just not helpful to me. And so in kinesthetic awareness, you have the bell curve is, so you have somebody who's a couch potato and the belly muscles just hang out loose and they don't work. So you give them some exercises and they grunt and groan, but they finally get some contraction in the lower abs and they begin to move. Then they keep doing that. They wait for the bus over and over and over. And little by little, the belly muscles begin to wake up and respond. Then they do more exercises, harder ones for longer, with more energy in them. And then they get into this like really working out thing. And not just the belly is moving, but everything is moving, but particularly maybe the core muscles are really getting a whole message. And then after a while over here, The core muscles are just strong, and they stay strong. And the person doesn't have to walk around thinking, I think I'm making my belly muscles strong now. Today, I'm making them strong. They're just strong. They are that. And this is a problem when you work with mostly children, mostly teenagers, and college students, or amateur singers who don't sing a lot, because you're always in the developmental stages all the time, finding and developing head, finding and developing chest, finding and developing the breathing, finding and helping the vowel sounds come out clearly, making sure the tone is clear. That's what you do in beginning students, and it's repetitious. If you work in a city or in a large town where there are professional singers, meaning people who get paid to stand up and sing in front of an audience, and they have expectations of sounding professional and being healthy, then you have more demand to make. So you up the ante, because those people have to have a higher skill set. And so if you take a ballet class, it takes years and years before your leg stretches up into the sky. If you play piano, it takes years and years before you can play a concerto with an orchestra, or where you can do a jazz tune and really just go all over the place with it. If we thought of singing that way, functionally, we would be better off. Because in point of fact, that is what skilled singing, trained singing is. And it does not mean that training makes you sound like an opera singer. That's the old mode. It also does not mean that you have to manipulate something in your throat. The only reason that would be necessary is if the exercises that you've been given to do cost you something. Like, in order to sing that sound, I got to manipulate or squeeze or pull or do something that actually your throat doesn't want to do. So when you're talking about exercises, you can develop control over the outside stuff, the things you can see and touch. Your face, your mouth, your lips, your jaw, the front of your tongue, blah, 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 and your head and neck relationship, okay? You can develop strength in your ribs and your abdominal muscles, in your capacity to breathe in, take and use the breath, and let it go out in a controlled manner. You can cultivate deliberate relaxation in your body and in your throat, or you can strengthen the muscles so that there is muscle tone in the system, and that's not tenseness, that's tension. You can develop your registration and separate chest from head and mix. You can get better vowels and connect to the belly muscles so that they're louder. You can correct and or control vibrato indirectly. And you can develop flexibility, meaning the ability to move the voice from one kind of sound to another and one pitch range to another without turning blue. And you can smooth out bumpy places. You can become more pitch accurate, which is almost always helped by being heady, and increase the number of pitches you can sing both up and down. And you can change the tone for expressive purposes, and pronounce consonants clearly in music that requires that, and not all music does. You can get stuck doing only one exercise all the time, so you get really great at one thing, and then the other things don't get, you don't make any progress. I had a student once who came in and said, "Oh, you want me to sing an E vowel?" I said, "Yeah." "Oh, I never sang an E vowel with my teacher. I always only sang ah." So, well, in our language, we actually do have that vowel, like me, free, tree. "Oh, yes, but she said that was closing your throat." We like all vowels. And if you're in a foreign country and you sing other vowels and you want to vocalize on them, do. I gave you some examples in section 7 of things that are interfaced between how loud you're singing, what pitch range you're in, what kind of a vowel sound you're on, and how that plays with the register quality. This is all ratio stuff. So it's like there's the triangle of the pitch you're on, and the vowel and the volume. And you can adjust it, okay? Now, some pitch ranges are more chesty than others, and starting out, the low pitches are chesty, or should be chesty, and high, heady. But if that person doesn't have that configuration, then you have to get in there and tinker with it until you can move it around. When you're working with children, which you'll see more of in the age-based parameters, you do have to consider the age of the child, and then you have to consider the parents. Tra-la-la. Okay, so now, if we go to page, where am I? This would be in section 9 application. So that's either 58 or 59. And I talked about cross-training. Now, that implies that you do one thing and then you can also do something else. And you can go back and forth until that's easy. So again, I make a sports analogy. We have people who do decathlon, triathlon, Ironman. They're doing more than one sport, and they're doing all those sports at a high level. Okay? Now, I don't know for sure, but I pretty much think that if you are a javelin thrower in a decathlon, or maybe they don't do javelin in decathlon, but whatever it is, if you're a discus thrower, you don't compete against the people who only do discus. Okay, if you're going to do a long jump, you don't compete against the people who only do long jump. You compete against other people who doing the three. So if you're a Broadway person or a West End person, you're a music theater person in Sydney, anywhere that's a professional company, you have to tap, you have to do modern jazz, and sometimes you have to do ballet. Now, occasionally, you have a ballet sequence that's actually a ballet. In Anastasia, which ran recently on Broadway, there is a segment of Swan Lake in the show because the Tsarina and the family goes to the ballet, and they had people from the New York City Ballet were doing the ballet. It was beautiful. But they also, during the rest of the show, were tap dancing and doing the rest of the jazz dancing that the cast did. So vocally, if you want to do classical music, you have to know what the parameters of that would be for you. You have to know what it does and doesn't do. And then if you're going to interface with the other styles, they have to have boundaries. So you can't be a high rock metal belter and then turn around and a few minutes later sing Bellini. Not going to happen. That's like being a long distance runner and a sprinter at the same time. If that were more doable, we wouldn't have opera singers trying to sing jazz and rock and pop music and sounding pretty bad. And we wouldn't have the few people have the trepidation to go from rock music into classical music and not do so well either. It's more than just a mental thing. You have to train and condition the muscles. Now, I used to be able to do these examples at the drop of a hat, but thanks to the left vocal fold issue, I can't, but I can lean in the direction of. So if I'm here, I don't even know if that's the right key. And then if I were going to do ba da boo ba ba boo ba boo ba doo ba, that is like a million miles away, 180-degree difference from the classical thing. And then the one in the middle that I tried to show you that makes noise, da da ya da 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 dee da da ya dee da dee da dee. Is that heady? Yeah, it's heady. But then when I go down, is it chesty? Yeah. And that would be represented by somebody like Audra McDonald or Christian Chenoweth. They're lyric voices, but they have a lower register, but they don't take the chest register up in the same pitch range as somebody like Idina Menzel. That's a big topic. We could do a whole workshop just on that. But all I'm doing here in level 1 is putting these little tidbits in your brain to think about, and then you spend time with them, you work with them, you try them out. This process is meant to go through your body. You can't just think, oh, I could probably do that. Gotta do it. And unless you have a medical reason in your vocal folds why you can't, and then maybe even not that, you have to do this process. If you take dance classes from somebody who was not a dancer in their life, you would go, well, why am I taking lessons from you? You can't even dance. Now, sometimes people retire and do choreography. Okay, that's different, but they did dance when they were younger. Same thing with a person who is coaching. Maybe they did sing when they were younger, and now they're not singing, but they used to sing. We don't learn applied stuff from people who never applied it. Would you go take golf lessons with a person who had never been a good golfer or a tennis pro? Why would you do that? And then the ideal, so that you have to study classical first, that's like, okay, you come to me, you want to learn how to sing Broadway sounds. You never studied. And I say to you, great. So now we'll study classical literature for 2 years, and then you can do music theater, which is like saying, well, you know, I really would like to play golf. And I go, okay, go take 2 years and learn how to swim or learn how to do gymnastics, and then come back to me in 2 years, because by then your whole body will be in really good shape and we can learn how to do golf. Who would do that? So the mindset here in the profession is skewed. And when you get to this place where things don't work, the first remedy is, well, I'm stuck, so now I'll squeeze something, or now I'll push something or pull something. Okay, that works for 5 minutes, and then 3 years later you sound awful and feel awful, and you got to ask yourself why. The point is that you should be, relatively speaking, able to keep going. And I know I don't sound perfect and I don't sound like I used to, but you know, the machine, in terms of function, I always demonstrate because I think it matters. Okay, so that's F, 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 F. I'm 71, I have a bad vocal cord. You can do that too. Maybe not that pitch range, but you should be able to do it. So this somatic voice work is to let you say, well, if I have a limit, why do I accept that? We as human beings are only as limited as we allow ourselves to be. The spirit is unlimited. The body has its limits, but sometimes the spirit overcomes the body quite a bit. Okay? Da, da, da. Now, speech to singing, 63. Da, da, da. I have until, Betsy, I have until 4:30 here. Is that right? Okay. Oh, good. Zippity and zip it and zip it and zipping along. Okay, well, before I go ahead, on page an application, and we're section 9, talked about cross training, talked about middle mix, and then each of these, everything we do has a plus and a minus. So if you work on chest register, it will make your voice stronger and sturdier and more resilient, more powerful, more energized, brighter, and it could make your voice sluggish, heavy. It could cause you to go flat. It can make your voice sound muddy. It can give you constriction. Head register is wonderful. It can make you feel free and easy and pretty and sweet and beautiful. And it can also make your voice thin and reedy and stuck in a little pin sized sound. So everything has its pluses and minuses. Same in the body. You know, working on the rib cage is great, but if you get so that your rib cage is like, then that's no good. Having strong stomach muscles is wonderful, but if they're like rock, that's not so good. So you have to think holistically here, everything as related to everything else. And we need to be informed by voice science and vocal health, vocal hygiene, vocal medicine. But you also have to be informed by your relationship to your physical self and the responses that your body gives you in response to the exercises. So if you're asking for somebody to work on head register and you're going, you're not helping. Okay? So by Monday, you should have a better idea after you've gone through the breakouts of what's going to help you develop head register in your students, what's going to help you develop chest register. And you do need to think that there's, when you're listening functionally, what is there? What's already there? What do you think is missing? Maybe developmentally has not yet been developed. What's there that would be better if it wasn't there? So that maybe you could unconstrict that part. And you always have to work the whole voice. You cannot say, somebody comes in and says, well, I would like some help with my high notes. You can't fix high notes. You have to fix the whole instrument. And lo and behold, when you get it working, the high notes will take care of themselves. If your high notes are always giving you trouble, it doesn't mean to say that you won't be working to do them. In some voices, that's always true. But it shouldn't feel like you're lifting 1,000 pounds. Something's wrong with that, okay? If we talk about the relationship to speech and singing, that's for me, that's page 63, maybe for you 64. There is an interface between speaking and singing, and years ago, it used to be written into the classical singers, the opera singers, that they did not have to speak the day before their performance or the day of their performance, because they found that use of speaking voice interfered with their singing. Now, why would that be? Because we only have one set of vocal folds. No matter what kind of sound you make, it's all coming from that combination of vocal fold behavior and laryngeal adjustment in the vocal tract. But if we think that, first of all, the vocal fold behavior is different, we've talked about that, but also we know a little bit that music is in one place in the brain and linear speech is someplace else. They do have an interface, but this is one of the reasons why singers tend to forget lyrics, but they don't forget melodies. You know, sometimes you're singing and the lyrics just go away. Even if you know the song well, if you have some distraction, you don't usually forget the notes, but you often can forget the words. So why is that? It's a different part of the brain. I had a teacher once ask me to sing a song I knew really, really well, very, very well. And then he gave me something to read while I was singing it. And then he asked me what I read. And I told him. And he said, do you realize that you're doing two opposite behaviors in your brain at the same time? No, I didn't think about that. You could try it sometimes. Sing something you know really well and then read a magazine and put it down afterwards and see how much of it you can talk about. Brain is doing two things at the same time that way. It's very interesting. So depending on where I speak and how I speak and where I sing, sometimes there will be an overlap and interface and sometimes not. So methods that based only on speaking leave out certain aspects of singing that are not like speech. In this list, we have, I've given you at the bottom of the page in the comparison between speech and singing, which is still section 9, the relationship between speech and singing depends on the habitual patterns used in speech, the natural tendencies of the voice as an instrument, and training of the voice overall. And then, of course, on the kind of music that's being sung. That's a lot of factors that impede upon how close to singing is speaking. So if I'm going to sing to you from where I am right now, I would be singing like this because this is how I'm talking to you. And I'm not making any adjustments. I'm just singing to you where I'm speaking, even with the noise. I hate that noise. However, I could speak to you like this. Oh, hi, how are you? Yes, I'm a soprano. Can you tell? I'm going to sing to you from here. I can sing here very comfortably. And if I spoke like that, all the time, and some few people do, you know, you go, And of course, I can talk to you down here too. I'm old now. And if I sang, I'd be singing like that. Hi, honey, how you doing? I'm a soprano, can you tell? So speaking generally, normal speaking has less range, has less volume. The pitches are random because they have to do with the inflection of what you're saying. The duration is random. The speed is random. The rhythm is random. And the meaning is variable. And sometimes the consonants are clear and sometimes they're not. And you don't necessarily think about registers when you're speaking. And certainly there is no vibrato unless there's something wrong. Singing is, comparatively speaking, has more range, more volume. It's specific pitches most of the time, specific duration, specific speed or tempo, specific rhythm, and specific inflection, and then the clarity of tone for the purposes of the sound that you want to make. Now, if you're singing jazz and you want to be breathy, that's fine. If you're singing, you want to be nasal as a choice, that's okay. And then you may have a specific desire to sing in a certain register in a certain pitch range, which is part of cross-training. That's also okay. A lyric coloratura, which is the highest soprano, a countertenor, or someone who's doing very wide-ranging experimental music where they sing all different kinds of sounds, is not doing something you would call speech. So be careful if you're a person who says, well, just sing like you speak. Well, if I'm speaking to you like this, then I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to talk to you like that, and then I'm going to sing, and it's going to come out like that. Now, if that's not what you wanted, but that is what I can give you, I'm not the person with the problem. You're the person with the problem. Because I don't talk there. Then you have to teach me how to talk like this, which, if I'm a young person, I can't do. All right, now the next page, the role of hearing in singing, I talked about that already. And then in terms of repertoire, it's very important to give students repertoire that fits within the parameters of their vocalizing, but is slightly less demanding. The exercises run about 6 months ahead of the songs. So if you have a student who can vocalize, let's say a soprano who can vocalize to a nice comfortable G, and a nice heady comfortable G, don't give her a song that lives up here just because she can sing that note. Give her something that's at least a couple notes lower, because you're going to vocalize past where you can sustain singing. And I mean, I just touched on that F above high C. I can't sing up there, but I just did vocalize there, right? So it's the same if you're teaching somebody to belt and they're beginning to belt an A flat or an A above middle C, A440. Don't give her a belt song that goes up to C. She's going to die. Choose the repertoire intelligently. And as I said, there are repertoire books that give you suggestions. We also have Kevin Michael Jones, I think is with us today, has a wonderful site full of repertoire lists of all kinds. He's listed in our bibliography. And if you need suggestions for repertoire, once you've gone through this course, you can get on our Google group, which we call our chat room, and ask for repertoire suggestions, and you'll get them. We have some people here who are repertoire whizzes, and they know every song and every key, every place to get it. It's amazing. Now, on the last, in section 9, there's a slide. Looks like this. Find that. Okay? Now, if you're not used to looking at these kinds of things, you can go, what the heck is that? But I took this because I saw Dr. Sundberg present this at the Voice Foundation Symposium, which I'm also going to tell you about maybe tomorrow. And I asked him if he could let me use this slide, and he said yes. So what you're looking at here is a study of multiple singers who do different kinds of music. So if you look here at this is the highest subglottic pressure, the most amount of air pressure underneath the sound when the singer starts to sing, and it's the female belter. And then the one that's right next to that is the baritone. So you can assume that that's a full-voiced male up high. And this is the pitch range up high. It's the loudest. And then you have the dramatic soprano that's less, still high, but less, because that's going to be still a head dominant sound, although a big, fat, loud one. And you can see that the lowest one is the countertenor. That's somebody who sings in a heady quality or falsetto quality, and that has the least subglottic pressure overall. We also have lyric sopranos they're less also, not a lot of sound. So what this tells you is that the vocal folds do control the airflow. That subglottic pressure is relative to the kind of singing the person is doing. It's very important that you understand that. Now, you may not, and if you don't, it's okay. We'll get you there. But this is important because I have been teaching all along saying the vocal folds control the airflow. And everybody's taught, no, that the breath controls the sound. Well, yeah, you have to have breath, and you have to know how to take the air in and control what you're doing in your body as you inhale and exhale. But if that's all that was necessary, everybody who could do some kind of deliberate breathing would sing like, I don't know, Celine Dion or Joan Sutherland or something. No, it's not just about breathing. You have to connect it to the sound, and then the sound, because of the open-close quotient and the other configurations, allows you to use a lot of breath or not a lot of breath, and you can actually develop control over how much air goes out separately from how loud that is or how breathy that is. You may not do that now, but it's possible, because I found out that I could do that, and that was an accident. I found that out when I was over at one of the hospitals, and they tested me on one of the machines, and I discovered that I could control all the parameters independently. So, who knew? All right, now I think that I can now take some questions from earlier today, which we did not have time to do, and from this section. And I don't know if you have questions for Dr. Trinice, but if you do, she can answer them as well. So, Betsy, what questions do we have?
Okay, so I'll go backwards. Is heavy subglottic pressure tiring to the vocal folds? That is, like belting.
No, because air can't be heavy. Air is not what's heavy. Okay? You can't say air is heavy. Belting as a vocal fold behavior can be fatiguing. Yeah. Okay? But the vocal folds control the airflow. So you want to have a lot of air in your lungs when you're belting, because that helps. Meaning it functions better if you have air in your lungs than if you take that as a breath. That's not an inhale. You also have to remember that people are taught to breathe down low, move the belly. And I've had students come in and the belly's moving like mad and has no relationship to inhalation. So I'm thinking, why is your belly moving? Oh, I'm doing breath support. No, you're moving your belly. The belly has to move because the air comes into the lungs, diaphragm descends, the viscera goes down and out because it has no place else to go, and then the abdominal muscles allow for that. And that is because the breath moves them out, which is why you don't want rock hard abs. But you can move your belly, and I can hold my breath and do a belly dance, with my belly. It has nothing to do with air. So you have to coordinate the inhalation with the movement, and then with the sound. Right? So you have to be careful that, because students will go, and then how much air is that? You have to teach them to go, and then everything has to relax and open, and the belly has to move, and then you can get a pretty good amount of air in a short period of time. That's a learned behavior. What else, Betsy?
Okay, we have a couple about the voice getting tired for something. So one is, how does one avoid vocal speech fatigue when teaching?
You have to learn to speak in a heady vocal production. In other words, I have to talk like that. Oh yeah, okay. Let's sing this exercise now, and we're gonna get louder because if I talk like this all day, believe me, I would be dead at the end of the day. And so a lot of singing teachers are very lazy about speech. That's another reason why you need two registers so that you can. Ah yes, I need to be over here. Oh hello, how are you? That makes me take more air. It makes me use more air. It makes me sit up better. Oh yeah, I have to do that, right? And so if you're finding that you're fatigued from teaching, from talking and demonstrating, your own efficiency isn't good. Okay?
Okay, and to piggyback on that, I have a 10-year-old female student whose speaking voice is very excitable and raspy. Singing, she fatigues pretty quickly and oversins. Any suggestions to correct?
Well, first of all, if you can get her to sing in head register and strengthen her head register, that will help. That's the most direct thing you can do. Certainly, if you have a good speech language pathologist in your community, having her have some sessions with that person, it would be helpful so that the speech pathologist, he or she, can give the child better speech habits so that the speaking voice is not so dysfunctional because of course that's going to bleed over into the singing. And you as a teacher can teach her to speak, oh, hello, how are you? A little more gently, a little lighter. She might resist at first, but you have to keep saying, no, this is necessary if you're going to become a very good professional level singer. These are the things that we need to learn. Everyone learns them. It's not negotiable. You know, it's like you're the parent of the voice. And again, I make the, example that your kid wants to eat 12 pieces of chocolate cake for breakfast. You might let that happen once, but you're not going to do that every day. If you're a good parent, you're going to find a way to say, I don't think so. So here, vocally, it's the same. You have to say, we got to get your speaking voice to be in a nice, comfortable place. And if you don't want to do that, you have to look for a speech pathologist or speech teacher. We used to call them elocution teachers who can help with that.
Okay, you ready for another one? I have two questions about countertenors. Can you speak to cross-training as it applies to a male who trains their lower voice in CCM styles and also sings as a classical countertenor? Would you approach that situation by cross-training the whole voice or focus on working on the different styles in each register? And also on countertenors, could you discuss that subglottic pressure for countertenors a little more? It was my understanding that since they are making a relatively large sound with a smaller portion of their folds relative to a tenor or baritone, they can work quite hard.
Yes, but then you can't confuse the two. Okay? Again, the subglottic pressure is not something one chooses to do or decides or is, I'm going to increase my subglottic pressure or I'm using more subglottic pressure. That's just a piece of information for you to understand about the mechanism. It is not a pedagogical tool. You cannot tell somebody, use more subglottic pressure or use less. Okay, so that's the first thing. It's not very easy to have a person who sings primarily in a heady sound to keep the middle range together. Okay, now if it's a tenor, it's a little different than if it's a baritone. It is possible, but it tends to split the voice in half. So that mix gets very elusive. So you could have somebody who has a nice, full, lower voice, well produced, and then they go up so far, and then it wants to just go to the falsetto-y sound. The more they stay in this place, and then they want to come down, it wants to go into chest. Working on keeping the middle together is the name of the game, and it takes a lot of patience. If the person is singing classical literature on both sides of the equation, then you have to try to find a place where the middle is really middle. I mean, it's not too heavy and it's not too light, and the vowel sounds are not too bright and brassy, but they're not too dark and warm, and the volume sits in a moderate, mezzo forte to mezzo mezzo piano to mezzo forte, and touches on forte. And then you have to understand that if they're going to stay on the chest side of the equation, when they go above the break, they have to modify the vowel shape so that it sounds classical. Or if they're going to do pop rock music, they have to modify the vowel in a different direction so that the larynx can gently rise and the position gets more lateral. That's a lot of work. And if you as a teacher are not familiar with and conversant with that, I would say to you, to start with that is very difficult. It requires a lot of information, a lot of knowledge and experience over a long period of time. The rule of thumb is when in doubt, get lighter, because singing headier almost never causes problems to the mechanism. That's why in the old days, a lot of teachers said, don't sing in your chest voice, dear, it's bad. Stay away from the chest voice. But the nature of the world that we live in, the CCM world, is that they like that sound and they often want that sound. And that's unfortunately why a lot of opera singing, where they teach you to keep the larynx in a low position under all circumstances, cuckoo, but that's what they teach, is that the sound on the top gets very swallowed. Can't sing like that. But if you're going to mitigate that, you have to mitigate everything: the vowel sound, the volume, and the physiologic adjustment in the positions in the pitch range. Big job. What else, Beth?
All right, so we're going earlier in the sessions. Following up on what Jeannie was saying about limitations, I really struggle with getting lower notes that many of my students can. I'm a lyric soprano and can sing in chest, but it does seem limited. What are some possibilities for singing lower?
Well, let's ask Betsy. How would you answer that, Miss Lyric Soprano?
Exactly. Well, to work on singing lower, I had to work on practicing chest register. So just working on strengthening that a little at a time. Jeannie's worked with me. We've worked on using the tube in the water bottle. That's actually helped a little bit to strengthen my voice. Mm-hmm. So when I first started, I had some chest register notes, no chest mix at all, and the rest was all head. Right. So over time, just practicing, it strengthens.
Yeah. Michelle, you're in the same category. What would you say?
Jeannie, I'm going to throw back a statement to you that you always say. Only that is that. If you want to strengthen chest register, you have to sing in chest register. Get it to be comfortable first, and then you have to stay there. And once it's comfortable, you put a little more pressure on it by making it a little louder. Use open vowels. Use semi-occluded exercises to strengthen that area.
Right. Remember that when you're working with a SOVTE, so semi-occluded, partially closed vocal tract exercises, it does help the vocal fold open-close quotient go toward closed quotient. But you cannot learn to belt by practicing SOVT exercises. You need to do it on an open vowel sound. And we have straws and we have corks and we have tubes. We'll get to that, not today, but we'll get to that. We use these to help the vocal fold behavior. It equalizes the breath pressure between the mouth and the throat and makes it easier for the vocal folds to close and vibrate. But if you're going to go, I feel a song coming on, you can't do that by going, not going to happen. The reason being that the muscles in the back of the mouth and the soft palate, underneath the soft palate, are muscles, and they need to lift and stay lifted, and that takes time because we don't really want to maneuver those muscles on purpose. I studied with a teacher who told me I should always lift my soft palate. It goes up over time in response to the concept you have of the vowel sound and the prompt from the front to the back. So that's why we go, and if you do that enough, the muscles will lift. You can look inside the mouth of somebody who's been trained to do that, and it makes a big proscenium arch. If you look at me, and I do this, you'll see this. And I can do that unconsciously because I've been doing it all my life since I was a 15-year-old. Okay, what else, Betsy?
Okay, let's see. Let's go back in this. What if the sensation is really different than the way you perceive the sound? This is when you were talking about sensation and perception. I'm playing with my high chest mix right now, and the sensation for me when I get the sensation of efficient TA dominant sound over C, above middle C, and how I hear it in the moment sounds more like CT when I go back and listen to it recorded.
Well, that could be good, because if you're singing it without too much pressure, you wouldn't necessarily feel the pressure. And in some ways, that's desirable. I mean, we want to sing it as if it was not effortful. And if you can keep it light enough without flipping over, that's actually good. As long as it still sounds connected to something that we would say has to do with speech. Okay? So sometimes how you hear it and how it feels could need to meet in the middle. Then you have to get used to that. Okay? What else?
Okay, so a couple questions for Dr. Trinice. So when you see the muscles tighten in the neck in a student, is that the lower constrictor muscles?
I'll just have to unmute Trinice. Give me 1 second. All right, Trinice.
Here we go. Good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Feel it. Okay, sorry. All right. So literally, if you're thinking about, again, inside the neck, what does that mean? There's several muscles, and we talked about the constrictor muscles in general. But remember, you have muscles inside in the neck that are surrounding the larynx. So there could be, sometimes it could be constrictor muscles themselves, the walls of the throat, but other times it can literally be the muscles within the neck that are trying to stabilize the sound the best way the singer knows how to. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if you see the neck squeezing that it's the constrictor muscles, but you probably can guess that the constrictor muscles are included in that squeeze while the neck muscles are also helping to stabilize that sound.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. And another question for you, Dr. Trinice. Is knowledge of how to sing free from constriction a necessary condition in order to be able to safely play with contraction, as you were demonstrating?
Yes, I think you can only figure out what contraction is if you know what the release feels like, right? So if I am contracting, and I mentioned this in the chat when someone's asking me specifically, what is the difference between constriction and contraction? And I just want to make it clear that constriction as a term means to narrow. But when we're thinking about it in terms of teaching, we typically refer to constriction as a muscular action that is stuck in one coordination where it doesn't freely come in and out of contraction. And we think of contraction as saying, I am engaging these muscles in a way that I can do temporarily and then disengage them. So in order for the person to understand that this sound that I'm making is contracted and not constricted, they would have to know what the freed version of their voice is and what the stuck version of their voice is by way of not being able to do anything else.
That's it. When you can't do anything else, you're stuck. And then that's constriction. And
Right.
another analogy is if a student comes in and this is their normal posture and you say, gee, your shoulders look really tight. And they go, oh, no, I feel okay. My shoulders feel good. And everybody in my family looks like this. Oh, really? Okay, so let's do some shoulder exercises. And you do a whole bunch of them. You move around and massage your shoulders, and, and all of a sudden the shoulders are like this. And you say, look in the mirror. Where are your shoulders now? Wow, they're lower. I didn't know they could even do that. That's the difference. This was the constriction which they became used to. They don't even feel. By comparison, as this gets loosened up, and you know what the loosening is, then you can have the awareness of, well, if this is loose, what was that other thing I was doing? And it's really hard to be able to evaluate that until and unless you can get comfort zone release, as Trinice was explaining, so that you, by way of comparison, that's how we know things, is by first we learn what they are, and we learn in comparison that they are not something else. That's how we know.
Okay, here's a question. I was reading an essay, sorry, forgot the name of it, but Ben Platt's vocal coach for Dear Evan Hansen. She had him transfer tension to a different part of his body while hitting certain notes. Is this actually an effective or healthy way of teaching?
I would say, generally speaking, to me personally, no. And it's because this is how I would say, if you're dancing, then go back to that as the analogy. You do want to have an engagement in the whole body, and you want to know that you're working as much as you can in your whole body. But, there are people who say, when you hit the high note, lift your leg up, or
That's right.
when you hit the high note, bend over so you can contract your belly, and that can work. But it's easier to just say, look, when you go up high, you got to really pull your belly muscles in pretty vigorously and keep your ribs out. So that actually, if you're going to transfer the tension out of your throat into something else, why don't you just develop the something else directly? So, the idea that somehow you have to relax when you go higher is wrong. You can't do any physical activity that is highly skilled activity by relaxing. How you get to do it is by doing it over and over and over and over until you become accustomed to it. Again, the leg in the air for the dancer. They stretch their legs like that every day for hours at a time. So then the choreographer comes along and goes, and now you'll lift the leg to here, in whatever the name of that is. I don't remember the ballet terms. And if you've been doing that in ballet class for 4 years, you don't go, I can't lift my leg up that far, it won't go. You don't have to transfer the energy of lifting your leg to your arm, because the rest of your body is conditioned to be able to allow you to lift your leg without killing you. So sometimes with young people, literally they don't have the strength or the stamina to do big stuff like a role in a show. I saw I was doing a master class in Alaska with a high school student, and he was doing a big baritone belty piece. This is a 15-year-old boy who was pretty much past puberty and was more or less his full size. First verse he did was fine. The second verse fell apart. And you could just see that his body had fatigued. His whole system had just given out. And so the analogy is, if I can run 2 miles, but I'm going to get up and run 4 miles because I think, well, I've been running 2 miles, I should be able to do 4. And on mile 3, you go, boy, this was a mistake. That has to do with conditioning. So what I said to this young man is, listen, this is a beautiful song for your voice, but you just turned into a baritone, 2 minutes ago. Wait 2 years before you try to attempt to get through this twice. It's too much for your body and your throat. Now, it's not that you sang it incorrectly or that you didn't do a good job. It was just that as you were singing, the whole thing imploded. And I've seen that in other master classes where Hanover was doing Sonambula, and the first verse was fine and the second verse collapsed, and the teacher was working on whatever, and I wanted to say to her, sweetheart, your ribs aren't strong enough, your back isn't strong enough, your belly's not strong enough, your lung capacity is not big enough, your coordination is beautiful, your artistic sensibility was correct, but the first verse was spectacular, but you went and did the second verse with the embellishments, and your instrument said, okay, I can't go anymore. I ran out of gas. And that can be affected by how tired the person is, or if they have been recently sick, or in a woman, if she's close to or in her menstrual period, and you suddenly don't have your typical stamina. And young people don't have that knowledge of themselves yet. So These are all considerations as to what makes a successful or not success in terms of choosing repertoire too. What else?
Okay, Michelle has a question for you.
Okay.
Yes. Jeannie, can you answer the question, if a teacher is not a natural belter, how would the teacher teach belting?
Well, my opinion is that if you're going to teach belting, you better learn how to belt. Okay? Because we don't teach from theory. This is an applied profession. You don't have to become a professional belter. You just have to be able to make the sound the way a belter makes the sound. You know, in other words, you got to be able to demonstrate it correctly. Otherwise, don't teach it. Just say, I'm really sorry, I don't teach belting. The cheap drugstore version is just work from speech. You know, but that assumes that the person has a speaking voice that has something to do with chest register, and a light lyric voice does not often. So then if you get that kind of person to belt, they are going to end up in big trouble. Doesn't work.
And Jeannie, did you give your definition of belting? Because I think that would be a useful thing.
Yes, we're going to say again, my definition is belting is chest register carried above the big passaggio at a loud volume, like essentially on open vowels. Okay? The chest register carried above the traditional break around E or F above middle C, or as far up as an A above middle C, at a loud volume on open vowels. So, I would call that a belted sound. Right? Now I can do that without turning blue. I wouldn't want to have to get up tonight and sing a whole show that way because I'm not in any kind of shape to do that. So there, you can learn as a teacher to demonstrate that without killing yourself, without necessarily saying, oh, now I'm going to go out and audition for parts that are for belters. Okay?
And I just wanted to say to everyone that some of your questions we may be skipping over because we know that topic is going to be covered within the next 3 days. But we are trying to get to as many questions as possible.
Yeah.
Betsy, do you want to pick up?
Yes. What does it mean that noise is balanced by head register in regards to working in chest register?
Chest register, when you first work on it, can be noisy. It can have a kind of a buzzy quality to it. It can make a kind of rumble in the voice because there's more activity in the vocal folds. So if that is coming in, usually if you work on head register, it tends to clear the sound up. Okay, so that's one of the benefits of having a good heady sound, is that it makes the chest register less likely to be noisy. And at the same time, as you get used to singing chest and you get more comfortable and you can get louder in a comfortable way, sometimes that also makes the noisiness of the sound go away, diminish. But you might have to tolerate some noise in order to find it.
Good. All right, I have a student whose head register gets really sticky. What is this a function of, and what can I do to help her?
Well, when you're talking about sticky, you mean that it doesn't want to come out? Is that what it means?
I don't know.
Okay, so sticky usually means that there's some kind of tension inside, some kind of constriction that you can't hear. And so the back of the throat is tight, the tongue is tight, the position is tight. If you're asking the student to sing a forward sound all the time, sing everything forward, that will lift everything and tighten it. And then the heady sound gets stuck a little. If there's too much chest in the middle, that'll make it stick. And if you are, if you're singing a lot in a chesty mix, then when you go to head, sometimes the head register will stick. So that means you have to work the back of the tongue, which we haven't talked about yet, to get the exercises to be fluid and to lighten up the middle a little bit. Also, high notes need more breath pressure in most people most of the time. So if you're trying to get heady and you're saying, oh, take it lighter, and you're up around E flat or E or F up here, or the octave below that for the guys, and you keep saying less, 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 no, that makes it worse. You need to let the person sing and sing out, even if it's not absolute, because that's the only way they can get there. Okay?
Okay, we had a couple of questions about the maturing teen, preteen voice and the vocal chink and breathiness. What can you say about that?
Well, if you're doing functional training, as you strengthen the whole mechanism, the vocal fold closure will get better, and you can do the SOVT exercises, and the chink will eventually close in most cases. Now, in some male voices, sometimes the very back stays open a little bit. But for the rest of the population, usually the exercises, especially stretching exercises, going higher and coming down on slides, will allow the vocal folds to have a little bit more close quotient, a little more resistance, and then the chink will close.
Okay, here's a question about, I found the reading on Wilhelm Reich's thoughts about breathing interesting. You discussed trying to keep the rib cage in an open position even during exhalation. Kristen Linklater's Freeing the Natural Voice argues that this continued expansion is unnatural and takes away from natural emotion and therefore natural voice. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, well, that's two different things that relate. It's not my personal experience that having a rib cage that's strong enough to stay open and quiet has inhibited my ability to be emotional in music and in life. Ask my faculty, how emotional am I? Jeannie, come off the roof now. Could you come down, please, Jeannie? Jeannie, hello? I greatly respect the work of Kristen Linklater, but in acting, they're not really thinking about head register so much. They're thinking about the whole voice as a voice connected to the body all the time. And if you are an actor and you have to roll around and do physical things that are like sword fighting or jumping around all over the place, your ribs might end up moving. And so you can make an argument for that. The thing is that you don't want the kind of openness in your rib cage that you would have as if you were in the army. It's not, and now I'm going to sing. That is going to inhibit you because that's really just an overinflated upper body. And then you're like, okay, that's not so good. But you can't really sing with the upper body collapsed either, because then you inhibit how much air your lungs can take in and how much they can expand. So what you want to find is you want to strike a balance. Now, the work of Wilhelm Reich was closer to Kristen Linklater in the sense that if you have any situation in which you are being really emotional, the breathing is going to go with that. So you're going to get agitated, the breathing is going to get agitated. And Reich believed that as we got older and we were socialized to suppress certain feelings, particularly sexual impulses, that the energy of those didn't have any place to go. So it got backed up into the musculature of the body. And he called that armoring, as in like a metal plate around you so that you could suppress the feelings and therefore you could also suppress the breathing. Cornelius Reed, who was the teacher of my last teacher, talks about that in the Free Voice rather extensively, and about how the mechanism, when it's free to burn oxygen, is going to move the whole mechanism. So vigorous breathing, being able to go, you need that for feeling. But I can learn to do that without going, I can learn to keep the movements inside, and not just for singing. When I was studying yoga with a yogini, a woman who was a true yogini, phenomenally able, I watched her do a breathing exercise on the floor. And I thought, I'm a singer, I know about breathing, I'm so good, I don't need to worry about any of that, I could do that. And I looked at her, and I thought, my God, if I didn't know better, I'd think she was dead. Nothing moved, nothing. And I thought, how can she take all, I mean, I could see she was clearly inhaling, and she wasn't dead. So I asked her afterwards, I said, Mary, how did you do that? And she said, well, it's an internalized movement. I'm doing everything inside. The outside's quiet. So, of course, I came away from that session going, I guess I don't know so much. And then recently, we have our wonderful Susan Postel, who actually is with us. And she has helped all of us with our awareness of our bodies. She is a Pilates teacher in LA and does a lot of online sessions. And she's going to give us her information in case you want to have a private session with her separately someday. And so when I first worked with her, one of the first things we did was she said, you know, I want you to pull your lower abs in when you breathe. And I went, in? Do you want me to pull my belly in when I breathe? Oh, I don't know. She said, well, just try. So I thought, all right, I'll give it a try. And of course, I couldn't pull my belly muscles in when I breathed. They wouldn't go. And I thought, oh boy, that's bad news. So I tried and tried and tried and tried. And she said, pull your belly in and breathe behind it, or breathe around it and underneath it, behind it. So the brain goes, huh? What? I had no idea. So long story short, after I tried and I tried and I tried, and finally then, lo and behold, oh, I could use those muscles and pull them in, and then I could still inhale low. And whoa, boy, was that different. That was like 4 years ago. So my breathing changed because of the awareness that and it's lots of stuff that's changed in my body, because every time we learn something more about how the body is, we shift our awareness, we shift what we're asking for. You can discover a whole bunch of stuff that you didn't know that you didn't know. And that work with her has helped me enormously. So you can think you know yourself, but if you're working with an expert, that expert's job is to say, oh, you're so good at that. What about this? And then you go, oh, yeah, I'm not so good at that, right? And that's how we learn. We have to go where we don't know something in order to learn it. And the feeling of not knowing is something you have to deal with at the level of your own ego, to say, okay, I'm willing to be a beginning person who doesn't know this, and let me see what I discover if I approach it that way. And pretty much everybody on the Somatic Voicework faculty, God bless them, had that attitude. You know, I throw something at them and say, well, that's great, but do this. And they're like, oh, okay, here comes Jeannie again. And they rise to the challenge and they try it out, and sometimes they come back and they go, hey, you know, I finally got my throat to do that thing. And I'm like, okay, good. You didn't lose anything, did you? Oh, no, everything else is still there. But that's the point of my job as a teacher, is to get you to make a sound that you didn't know you had, or to, if it's body work, to get your body to do something experientially that you didn't know it could do. That's the point of conscious teaching and conscious experience while we make whatever sound we're doing or whatever activity we're in more fully available. And that's process-oriented behavior. It's not Western right, wrong, yes, no, do good, don't do good at all. It's experience, try something as an experiment, see what your experience is in that, and then evaluate it as you do it or after the fact. So we don't come with the idea that we already know what we're going to sound like before we open our mouths, because that way you'll always only sound the way you sounded in the first place. Every teacher I ever had always had me sing up high. Okay, so you go to voice lessons, and I go home. And sometimes I'll sing louder, open your mouth more. Okay. I thought that's all there was to know. And then I came to New York and somebody said, well, you don't have any fullness or richness. And I'm like, well, this is my voice. And then I had to work on the integrating chest. It took me 3 years. But suddenly I had a whole bunch of stuff to sing with that I had never had before. And you know, the fact that I could sing up high was what the teachers working on that didn't teach me anything. And so you encounter that with students. Some of them can just do certain things really well, and you want to keep those. But you want to ask them to do the things they're not so good at, and you got to do that slowly and patiently and repetitively over time. And you have to, give them emotional and psychological support and reasons why, why this is why we're doing this. This is going to get us over here in good time. This is going to get better. Be patient. A lot of times, if you tell the person what you're doing and why you're doing it and where you're going to get to, they'll try. Okay? It's only when you come in, well, you should be able to do this because I'm showing you how to do it. We don't want to go there. Okay, so we are now at the end of this segment. And what do we have? We have a little break, right?
15-minute break.
Yeah, so this is a good time to do the stretches and the physical movement and use the bathroom and get a glass of water, and I'll see you in 15 minutes.